Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. Today's presentation, Patagonia Ice, exploring Argentina's Los Glaciares National Park, is brought to you by NatHab Expedition Leader Dan Hagaman. A little bit more about our presenter. Dan is a naturalist, educator, and guide who has spent decades migrating seasonally between Alaska and Patagonia, following the rhythms of wildlife and the changing seasons. His work spans across Latin America and Alaska while also teaching in Chile. With a background in anthropology and mountain ecology, he brings a deep interdisciplinary understanding of wildlife ecosystems and conservation to every expedition. Thank you for being here today, Dan. Over to you.
Thank you, Brooke, for the introduction and this opportunity to present on one of my favorite places to travel in the world. So this webinar will highlight Glaciares National Park in Argentina, and it will explore the climate, the geology, conservation of this really unique and dynamic landscape. And also look at some of the conservation stories and challenges that this park has had over the years. So this park it's well known for hiking and climbing. Fitzroy and Cerro Torre are big climbing spots for big wall climbers. And people from all over the world come here to visit the glaciers and the peaks. So it's really also known for its accessibility of the glaciers, like Perito Moreno Glacier, the Viedma Glacier, and the Uppsala Glacier, which I'll talk about in the presentation. So I'll begin by describing the location and give you a little background, and then I'll get into some conservation history as well as some of the wildlife that you might find in this park. So this is probably the image that comes to mind when you think of Glaciares National Park. You've probably seen images of this glacier in your travels. Some of you have probably visited. Some of you may have been on one of my trips here, which I've been doing for quite a few years now. This is Perito Moreno Glacier. It's one of the easiest glaciers to get to because of it. It's a very unique view because you're on a peninsula looking at the front of the glacier itself. And it's close to a town called Calafate, which is a big hub in the whole region. So just to give you a little more background on myself, so why am I presenting? Well, I've been working in Patagonia for over 20 years. I think the first year I was down there was 1998, and I came down there because I was working as Peace Corps in Bolivia, and I came down to this area to explore, get to know the region, and I just fell in love with the place, and I've been coming down almost yearly ever since that time. Currently, I live in Colorado with my family, so I just love the mountains, and I studied anthropology at the University of Colorado in Boulder, and then did my graduate work in University of Wisconsin in Madison. So I also do the Patagonia. So aside from the Patagonia trips, I do many of the Alaska trips, some bear viewing trips, and I also work in Mexico with the monarchs, and then down in close to home in Colorado and Utah in the canyons area. So I'm going to start with the big picture here, and this is Argentina's national park system, which is, it's actually a little bit more than it's changed here. It's not 38, it's 40, over 40 different parks. And you can see where Glaciares National Park is located, which is in kind of that southern area of Argentina. And it's on the border between Argentina and Chile. If you notice here, a lot of the national parks in Argentina are located up in the high Andes and also down along the coast, and they have some marine protected areas as well that are included in this slide. So just that's kind of where we're looking at, and I'll give you just to back up a little bit and look at comparing U.S. national parks to Chile and Argentina, and I'm going to talk a little bit about Chile because it borders that area of Argentina that we're talking about. Argentina does not actually have that much of its land tied up in national parks. So you have 41 national parks, but it's only 1.5% of the land. If you look at the United States over here in the bottom right, we have 63 national parks, and it's 3.4% of the land. Okay, so it's also a very small amount. If you look at some other countries that have really established some conservation, have large conservation movements to establish national parks, Chile and Costa Rica have close to 30% of their land in national parks. So just as a comparison there, I think this is good to keep in mind. Where is Patagonia? So Patagonia is that area, the southern tip of South America, which includes both Argentina and Chile. It's not a country, but we kind of think of it that way, and it is a company as well. And it was started, the company Patagonia. I'll talk more about that in the presentation, but that was kind of inspired by this area, this southern tip of South America. I tend to use a broad definition for Patagonia that extends further north into the Lakes District in Chile and up towards Bariloche in Argentina. This is kind of the south. This is the south. This is like what we this is like the west for us. This is the area that was not really populated, and so people started moving south in the 1800s. But this is kind of that Wild West area, and I'll talk more about that in a few slides. But you can see where Glaciers National Park is here in the south by these giant glacially fed lakes. What is unique about this area is that it has glaciers. So Patagonian icefields, they're found in 3 different areas. The Southern Patagonian Icefield is the largest. That's the one we're going to spend time talking about. There's also the Northern Patagonian Icefield, and then there's an icefield in the south on Tierra del Fuego called the Darwin Icefield. So the Southern Patagonian Icefield is very extensive. It's about 5,000 miles squared, and it extends out in Argentina. The water melts into glacial lakes, and on the Chilean side, it melts out into fjords. And I'll show you some slides here coming up. This is remnants of the last glacier maximum, which is about 20,000 years ago. And you can see the Northern Patagonian Icefield and the Southern Patagonian Icefield on here. 20,000 years ago, this was much more extensive. The ice covered a significant amount of South America, extended much further up into the Andes, further north. But it has been reduced down to these 3 different spots and a few isolated mountains. So glaciers have left their mark on the landscape, and one of the characteristics in this area are these jagged, rugged mountains like Chaltén or Mount Fitzroy, which is 11,000 feet. It's not super high when you consider other mountain ranges in the world. Colorado here, where I'm at, we have 14,000-foot peaks. Up in Alaska, you have Mount McKinley or Mount Denali, and that is over 20,000 feet. So these mountains aren't very high, but they are glaciated. So they consist of granite towers, like what you see here, Fitzroy and Cerro Torre. This is one of the viewpoints that you can get to. It's called Laguna de los Tres, or the 3 lagoons. And it's close to the village of Chaltén. And it's named after, this mountain is named after, well, Fitzroy is named after the captain of the Beagle. In 1834, Charles Darwin came up the Santa Cruz River to explore South America, and Fitzroy was the captain of the Beagle. It was later named Mount Fitzroy after the captain. Oh, let me go back here just a second. So Chalten, the mountain itself, this is an indigenous name that means smoking mountain. So a lot of times you'll see lenticular clouds hanging out over the top of the mountain, and they just kind of stay there. So it looks like it's smoking. It's not volcanic in origin. These are granitic plutons that formed underneath the earth and then were eroded away later on by glaciers. So if we take a closer look at the Southern Patagonian Icefield, is 220 miles long. So it's very extensive and extends north and south along the Andes. The west side, I mentioned before, the Chilean side, calves into fjords, salt water on the west. And on the eastern side, the side that we're talking about, calves into freshwater lakes. And the big lake that we see there, kind of in the middle, just north of Calafate, which is the main town, is called Lake Argentina, which is the largest lake in Argentina, totally in Argentina. So they say, a lot of the guides will say that yes, 70% of the Southern Patagonian Icefield is in Chile, but the best 30% is in Argentina. So that's a good reason to go. So if we take a look, I kind of turn this on the side, and Glaciares National Park here can be divided up into 3 different parts. So you have the south, you have the central, and you have the north. And so the south area is where you would see Perito Moreno Glacier. That central area is a place that I'll talk about. It's difficult to get to, and you get there by boat. And Estancia Cristina, or a big ranch, Cristina Ranch, is located in that area. And then it's about a 3-hour drive to get from Calafate up to kind of the climbing town of Chalten, which is in the northern section. And it's about 3.5 to 4 hours to get there. So just to give you, why are there glaciers at this latitude? Why are they here? There's 2 factors, basically. There's the first factor being the Andes Mountains, kind of the rise in elevation that cools the air. And then there's also the prevailing winds at this area, 50 degrees south or so, you have these prevailing winds that come from the west. They're called westerlies, and they bring the moisture-laden air in from the Pacific Ocean. And then when it hits the Andes, they rise up, and then it drops the moisture in form of snow, and it forms the ice fields. So there are in the Southern Patagonian Icefield, there's over 40 different major glaciers, and another 200 smaller glaciers are also there and present. So these westerlies create a very different climate on the western side, which is very lush and green and raining quite often, almost daily. And on the Argentina side, it's dry, it's in the rain shadow. And so it's a Patagonian steppe. So you have, as you get further away from the mountains, all the way to the coast, the Patagonian steppe extends all the way out into the coastline. If you take a look at the precipitation gradients between eastern and western side, I feel like this is extremely important to note, is that you have in some areas, in a little bit north of where we're talking about right now, they get up to 26 feet, like 800 millimeters or 8,000 millimeters, 26 feet of precipitation a year. Okay, in the orange area, for example, the Patagonian steppe, some of the areas only receive about 4 inches of precipitation a year. So there's really varied climates in here. The precipitation in the drier areas is very steppe-like. And I have this is the kind of the dry Patagonia steppe, a lot of grasslands, a lot of shrubs. These are Darwin's rhea that are grazing out here. And you can see that the landscape is very different than what you would have closer to the mountains, where you have much more precipitation. And this is an area that is the Magellanic, the subpolar forests. And you have the southern beech trees are what dominates this landscape here. And some of the trees can get to be a couple 100 feet high. So it's very lush and green. This is a picture taken in the fall, where you have these Nereid trees, which is a deciduous type of southern beech, and they're shedding their leaves, changing color, and this happens in kind of at the end of April. All right, so we get into, now let's focus in more on Glaciers National Park, where it is located. It's located in the province of Santa Cruz, and it borders the area of Chile. You can see Chile is in gray, and Argentina is in kind of the tan color. Glaciers National Park, you can see here, here's some iconic images, the seal that they have for the national park. You have Fitzroy in the background there, you have the Perito Moreno Glacier, and then you have an Andean deer, it's called the huemul, which is a species that's highly endangered on the logo there. Initially, this area, so we're talking about early 1800s, and before that, we had people called the Yaonakink, or the Tehuelche people. They were nomadic people that moved through this area seasonally, and they utilized resources like the guanaco, which is the wild llama, and the rhea, which is the Darwin's rhea, like an ostrich. Kind of using their hide, they use their hides for structures and for clothing and for eating. And much of their culture has, over the time, has been lost or forgotten, but there are still a lot of place names that that honor their language and their culture in the region. And so the history of the place is really interesting. So I'm going to go over a few of the important, here's some of the peoples of Patagonia. We're primarily talking about the Yaonakink or the Tehuelches, which were nomadic people, but there were other people that inhabited this area too. The Kaweshkar, the Yaganes, the Seknam or the Onas in Tierra del Fuego. So there were other people that were there as well. Sadly, much of that culture has been lost over time, but there is a movement now to kind of regenerate some of that knowledge, that traditional knowledge. One of the important figures that we will talk about, and one of the important time periods, is the late 1800s. Remember what was happening in the United States at that time? We were moving west. It was the kind of that land of the final frontier, moving west to establish or to homestead properties. Perito Moreno, this is Perito Moreno. He was actually brought down to this area because there were disputes between Argentina and Chile. There's no love lost between the two countries. I think now it's probably better than ever. But for many years, there were conflicts, border conflicts between the two countries. And anyway, Perito is a term for like expert in Spanish, where he was an expert in many different things. He was a geographer, he was an anthropologist, and he studied natural sciences. So he lived from 1852 to 1919. We're talking about that time period. He actually reminds me a lot of Teddy Roosevelt, you know, in that, and he actually met Teddy Roosevelt, came down and visited with him. He surveyed the border between Chile and Argentina, and in 1881, he established the border by looking at the watersheds. He said, well, if the water flows to the west, it belongs to Chile. If the water from these glaciers flows to the east, it belongs to Argentina. And that was how they delineated the line between the two countries. And he has a glacier named after him. He is quite an important figure in Argentine history. So he came down to kind of establish, and this was the Wild West at the time, so there weren't many people living in this area aside from the Guanacan people and some early settlers that started ranches. The estancias, or large ranches, were owned by mostly European settlers. There were settlers from different countries. Welsh settlers inhabited the north. There's also quite a few settlers from Croatia and England, Germany as well. They came to ranch. You can see here this estancia. This is the typical estancia that you would have. You can see Fitzroy in the background. Just an incredible landscape to live in, but very harsh conditions. So in the late 1800s, settlers, they came to ranch. They were looking for other things. They were looking for gold. They were looking for getting rich quick. And they found that this was great land for ranching. And the white gold is the wool then that was then exported to Europe. So large tracts, they were large tracts of land called estancias. They were handed out to settlers. And if they improved upon the land and they lived there for a certain amount of time, that land was then theirs. They came from all over. Like I said, the wool and the meat was then shipped to the coast. And I have this next slide here. So shipped to the coast on wagons. There were no roads at that time. And so they would take these over the tundra to the coast 200 miles away to a town called Rio Gallegos. And they would export these bales of wool that weigh about 300 pounds. So some of these bales, and the wool was used during, you see, early 1900s. This is the time period when World War I was beginning, and even World War II, there was still export going on. Those are used to make uniforms, and also the meat from the animals was then used canned up or frozen on refrigerator boats and then shipped overseas. So this was a big industry in the South. And that culture, in many cases, it still exists today. There's this gaucho culture. It feels very much like the Wild West out here. People are still using horses to get around. They manage huge thousands of, I think one of the ranches that we stay at, they have 18,000 sheep on the ranch, a couple thousand cattle. It's basically one acre of land is needed to feed one sheep. So they needed large tracts of land. Also some interesting characters that came down over the years. Butch Cassidy, the Sundance Kid, they came down here in 1905. It was the Wild West. They kind of burned their bridges here in the States, and they were, says here, they were looked for in like Wyoming, Utah, Idaho, Colorado, and Nevada. They were wanted criminals, and so they wanted to start a new life, and they came down here for a time trying to escape that, but they ended up robbing a bank in they robbed a bank in the Bank of London in Rio Gallegos, and then they had to hide away up in this or nearby this national park. So this area has brought a lot of different characters over the years. In the 1950s through the 1970s, and even today, this area has been known for mountaineering. This is incredible spire called Cerro Torre. And it attracts people from all over. I think the first time that this is a very difficult climb, you can see the kind of the mushroom, the snow mushroom and ice mushroom that's on the top of this. It's a couple hundred feet. pure ice and snow that's on top of this this mountain. But this is kind of on the, it's kind of outside of the ice field, but within kind of the Fitzroy Range. And all these mountains were carved up by glaciers. This is Fitzroy. I mean, this is in the spring, or our spring, their fall, kind of when light levels are down lower. It's easier to get these morning and night shots. This was early morning one morning, and we just had this amazing reflection off of Fitzroy off in the distance. The first time that Fitzroy was climbed was 1952. And it's been climbed every year since. It brings people in from all over the world. In the 1980s, then, tourism began. The town of Chalten was actually officially founded in 1986. So pretty recent when you consider it. Calafate existed before that, and it has grown when I first went down there in 1998 to, it had about 5,000 people living there permanently year round. And now this year there's about 30,000 people living in that area. And so these areas have grown. Tourism has become the major drawing point for people visiting this area. And we'll talk more about that. One of the ranches that we stay at, we have stayed at up until this year, I think, is Estancia Cristina. This was once a ranch, but then was incorporated into the national park. The original owners, they established this area in the early 1900s. They were from England, Percival and Jesse Masters. They immigrated, they were looking for gold, but they started working on a ranch near Rio Gallegos, and they wanted their own property, and they figured they could go ahead and do this as well. So they established this ranch. Currently, it is operated, they started doing tourism in the 1950s and 60s. They started doing tourism for climbers, but also for researchers that were researching the ice fields. And this is then now managed by a group of, an organization of climbers from Argentina, and it's now managed touristy as a tourist destination, but not as a ranch anymore, because it is located within the national park. The park expanded around them and incorporated this ranch into the park in 1937. To get to Estancia Cristina, there's these large catamaran boats that we take out there, and you can either visit for the day or you can stay overnight at these places. Beautiful setting. These are some of the buildings that we stay in when we're staying down there, and the lighting is just spectacular. Early mornings. This is one of the places where you can visit a glacier called the Uppsala Glacier, which I'll point out here. You actually take those four-wheel drive vehicles up to the top of the viewpoint where you can see this glacier from a high point, kind of overlooking the glacier, kind of on the north side of this lake that's up here. And you can see the glacier calving into this freshwater lake here, and you can see the icebergs down here. And I'd like to, one of the challenges, and I guess it's not necessarily a challenge, but it's just due to global warming, these glaciers are melting out at an exceptional rate. From this time period, Uppsala is the largest glacier in the whole of South America. It's long. It's about 37 miles long. It's far larger than the Perito Moreno Glacier, which is about 1/3 of its size. But if you look here, this is in, let's see, 1968. The Uppsala Glacier, since 1968, the Uppsala Glacier has shrunk or receded back 40 kilometers, which is significant. So it's very notable even on these satellite images. This image was only from 1986 to 2014, but the records go back even further. One of the other glaciers that's found in the south area of the park is the Perito Moreno Glacier. It's about 19 miles long and 3 miles wide. And you're able to see that from both walkways and down on the water. You can take a boat trip and see it from the bottom as well. This is the most famous glacier of the area because it's easily accessible. It is up until 2018, this was a glacier that tended to, it blocked a narrow channel. So the glacier, when the glacier advances, and it advanced in the past, it was advancing every few years. About every 5 years or so, it would block itself off, dam itself up, and it would create this ice dam that would prevent water from, you look at where the glacier is located, this is a satellite image. If you look at Argentina Lake on the right, which is that blue color, kind of that turquoise color, and then you look at the gray color, the south part of that branch. That is actually, it does not, it flows into the north part of the lake and then down into Argentina. So when the glacier comes down, it blocks itself off and creates a dam that allows the south part of the lake to rise up about 100 or 150 feet. So the difference between the south and the north part of the lake is 150 feet. And what happens is then when the glacier advances, it breaks through. After all that pressure, eventually that water breaks through. And this was the big attraction here in the past, is to get images. This is not my image, but this is an image of kind of the ice bridge that forms between the north and the south parts of the lake. And you'll see lots of calving and action happening here. What's sad, let's see, we take a look. This is at that same time. This is during one of those advancements of the Perito Moreno Glacier, and you can see lots of calving happening. And you can see on the left-hand side the ice bridge, and then the walkways where you can observe. This is from when it advanced last in 2018, and this is current. This is from this year or last year in December, and this is how much the glacier has gone back at that point. It may not create a dam anymore. This is something that glaciologists are looking at, kind of understanding what's happening with this glacier and why it is changing. You can see another image here of the glacier and the last time that it dammed itself up in 2018. Another option to see this glacier up front and up close is to take small boats out into Lake Argentina. So we take this boat out. We're just kind of observing the icebergs that are out there, taking advantage of, here's some of our guests picking up some of the bitty bergs or bergy bits. Here's another image from the glacier on the south side. And it allows you a different perspective. This is one of my favorite. It's a difficult images to get because there's a lot of, the light is difficult to play with, but for photographers, it's exceptional to get out there, take pictures from the boat, from down low. This is a glacier that rises about just over 200 feet. So you have 200-foot spires of ice that sometimes calve off, and we are in a boat at a safe distance away from the calving parts of the glacier. Here's another image, and this is when I first started guiding with NatHab down here. I took an image in 2019, and you can take a look at the image from 2025, the one I just took, and you can compare the two and how much the glacier has receded back. Take the peak. If you take a look at the peak in the background, and you draw a line straight down, you can kind of guess kind of the distance and how much that glacier has receded back. On the left-hand side, you can also see remnants of that ice dam on the shore of the peninsula that we're standing on. Now, not only does this national park have glaciers, but it has lots of wildlife, and this is probably what I enjoy the most, is the wildlife that's there. Guanacos are wild relatives of the llama. They're found all through the Andes, from Ecuador, Bolivia, in different areas. So you have the guanaco as the wild relative of the llama, and then you have another relative, the vicuña, which is the wild relative of the alpaca. And we don't have vicuña here. We have guanacos. They can get to be 400 pounds or so. They're large animals. They're like a deer, and they're found in big herds. So you might have a couple hundred guanaco in one area, and they tend to it tends to be one male, one dominant male, or a couple dominant males, and they would kind of observe their group from a high point. And they let out this call that's called a whinny or a relincho, and to tell the group that there might be danger nearby. So if there's other animals that might be preying upon the herd, pumas are primarily the major predator. You also have animals like the Darwin's rhea, which is a wild, it's a relative of the ostrich or the emu from Australia. It's in the ratite family. Other animals are the cassowary, and also related to, similar to the kiwis in New Zealand. And these get to be about 3 feet, 3 to 4 feet tall. And it's the males that tend to take care of the young. So the females will come in, lay their eggs, mate with the male, lay their eggs in the nest that the male created, and then go off and visit another male. And then the males will then raise the chicks of multiple females. So you might see groups of these, flocks of these that might be upwards of 30 individuals. I mentioned before that the puma has many names throughout the Americas, but it's the widest ranging predator in the Americas. Ranges from all the way from, well, the Florida panthers, they're pumas, or mountain lions, or catamounts, or cougars. They have different names in different places. It's also one of the animals that has the most common names allocated for it. That's one of those animals that is rare to see, but it's amazing when you do see them. It is absolutely stunning to see them in the wild. And one of the places to see them is in this area of Argentina, but then also in the border of Chile, in Torres del Paine National Park. Another one of the birds I love. So the birds, for me, I love all the unique bird life that you have in this area. The Chilean flamingo, I put Chilean in quotes because we're in Argentina, and I think they call it the austral flamingo instead of the Chilean flamingo. Like I said, no love lost between the two countries. So many of the birds, Chileans will call them Chilean birds, Chilean swallow, Chilean flicker. In Argentina, there's different common names. So Chilean flamingo, you'll see it in lakes and lagoons in and around Calafate, but then also in the small lakes in the region. Another bird I exceptionally like is the Andean condor. It's a 10-foot wingspan. They're scavengers. They have huge, they're a landscape bird where they inhabit huge areas and they nest up in the rock cliffs. And this is a male, you can see, with the crest there. So some of the animals that you might see, or birds that you might see in the area near the Andes, as we know, said that there's a lot more moisture in these areas. These are southern beech forests. These are evergreen beech, and they're located, you can see the icebergs off in the distance here. So this is actually on a hike that we do near Perito Moreno Glacier within the national park. But you see the southern beech forest, very different habitat than what we're seeing in the open Patagonia steppe, and very different animals that you might see there. One of them is the austral pygmy owl, a cute little guy. One of like 5 different owls that you find in the area. You might also see the Magellanic woodpecker, which is one of the largest woodpeckers. You'll most likely hear them before you see them. This is a male with a red head. The females have a black head with a little curly Q feather on the top. Another bird that we might see in the open areas, grasslands, is the southern lapwing, which is one of my favorite birds. And we have birds that are similar that we have in the States that range all the way down into Patagonia. From here, the American kestrel is one that we tend to see often. So we have all these animals that are within this national park. Tourism has been increasing in the national parks as well. And there's these remnants of kind of old estancias. There's still a lot of ranching in the area, sheep ranching. I'd like to talk about some of those conservation challenges that this place has, and then also go into some of the solutions and leave on a positive note. And so some of the challenges: fence lines. Thousands and thousands of miles of barbed wire have been put up all over the place. There have been lots of efforts to take down some of these fences. If there isn't active ranching going on, these fences aren't needed anymore, and they need a lot of maintenance. And so it's also a hazard for animals like the guanaco navigating these landscapes that migrated from place to place over time or seasonally. And so a young guanaco getting up over a fence, this is a barrier that is difficult to surmount. And what happens in many cases, and you'll see if you travel this area at all, the fence lines, many of them, they have animals that get caught up in the fences and they can't get out and they die there. Pumas have actually are now thought to use the fence lines for hunting. And so they find free meals along the fence lines. There's ways of designing fences, and this is a change that's happening, is to design fences that animals can get over easier or to squeeze through. So you'll see in these types of fences, the rheas tend to just squeeze through the fence lines. The guanacos tend to get stuck on them. I'd like to mention this. This was quite a few years ago now. This is one of the people that I admire him greatly. This is Douglas Tompkins. Douglas and Chris Tompkins. This is when we were working in Pumalin. He came in for a time And if you've heard of the Tompkins Foundation or some of the conservation stories in Latin America, in South America, especially in Patagonia, the Tompkins have done some amazing things with taking private land and doing conservation on private land, and then donating a lot of that land to countries of Chile and Argentina to form national parks. And this is an initiative that's being, I think it's a very positive thing. He has set, well, he passed away about 10 years ago now, but Chris is following up in his and doing some amazing things with new parks in different areas, like in the tip of South America, in Chile. But they donated, they consolidated land. They took out a lot of those fences over the years. In Patagonia Park, they took out thousands of miles of fences to reestablish those corridors that animals were migrating through, and have brought some of those animals back over time. One of the great examples is the rewilding project in Chile with the Darwin's rhea, as well as the huemul, or the Andean deer. And so these are projects that I think they're gaining much more support and have inspired other landowners, big landowners, to do conservation on their large tracts of land. And this is happening both in Argentina and Chile. This is from this last trip. This is a puma. We're learning a lot more about the pumas in the area through science. And I think science is an important tool. In the past, landowners would just shoot puma. They would, they were competition for the sheep. They would also shoot guanaco because that was competition for the sheep. And so that idea that pumas were not valuable in the ecosystem is changing. First in Chile, and it's been very successful in Chile in certain areas and on private land, and that is being adopted in Argentina as well. One of the ways that we can learn more about puma are with radio collars, and we can learn about their movements in the landscape, what places they tend to be, tend to inhabit, and how we can avoid conflicts with people and domesticated animals like sheep. I'm going to mention this. There's a lot of education that's going on in the area now with coexistence. Sadly, I wasn't able to attend this conference, but Nicholas Lagos has been working with puma conservation with an organization called Pantera, which is an international NGO working on big cat conservation worldwide. But he is very focused in on puma conservation in the area of Torres del Paine in Chile. This was actually a workshop that he did up in Chaltén, which is in Argentina. And so they're trying to expand out and teach others, both guides and local landowners, the value of keeping puma on the landscape. One of the other projects, camera traps are valuable ways to learn about the movement of animals through the landscape. And this is just an example of one of the animals that came by the day before we arrived. Another way that ranchers are able to protect their livestock is to utilize dogs. Maremma sheepdogs and Great Pyrenees live with the sheep, are raised with the sheep, and they actually are able to smell puma and protect. If the sheep are concentrated in an area, they're able to protect the sheep from the puma. And so reduce the predation on those animals so that pumas prey on the wild guanaco instead of the sheep. And that then increases or decreases the amount of loss of animals for the rancher. And this is a project that is ongoing. and a lot of education is going on in the area. This is actually a ranch in Chile, but is also happening in areas of Argentina. And so this technique can be, if it's modeled and if it's successful, can be utilized in other places as well. I mentioned the Andean deer. This is a species that has been highly reduced over time due to hunting, due to habitat loss. There's multiple projects in the area that are trying to increase the number of Andean deer, or at least protect the habitat of these animals so that they're able to survive and reproduce. And one of the areas that I really enjoy going up to, Chalten. Chalten is the northern area of the national park. And I see a lot of really sustainable tourism options. And I feel like I don't see this as much in other places, but there are some, these are geodesic domes. A lot of the buildings are built with local woods in the area. They're trying to reduce their footprint on the environment, but also give people a comfortable stay, so they're able to appreciate the landscape. But there's a lot of these unique tourism projects that are going on throughout the region in Glacier National Park. This is kind of the inside of the dome. It's a very comfortable setting, very homey, but excellent food, great views, amazing hiking, and just trying to reduce the amount of impact that large hotels and structures have on the landscape. They're doing a lot with sustainable tourism with different types of energy. For example, solar panels, there's hydropower. There are many different composting toilets is another thing that they have utilized. And I guess I'd like to conclude on this positive note, because I think there's a lot of potential in this area, because tourism is increasing and it is an issue, but it also, people recognize that it is an issue and they're doing things about it. Patagonia it's a very remote and has many challenges with managing the increased tourism, but people are working on sustainability over time. And there's really an environmental consciousness that people have when they are designing hotels and restaurants and services that tourists need. And many of the hotels have, like I mentioned before, they've implemented projects like wind and hydropower, different sustainable energies. They also use, you see this all through Calafate and Chalten, is the single-use plastics are discouraged. Many of the containers that are made of paper or compostable material are used instead of plastics. Filtered water, a lot of times, is on tap at the hotel, and it's given out at restaurants to discourage people from using plastic bottles and other things. I mentioned composting toilets and biofilters are used in buildings to reduce the black water waste and contamination of the water supply. The town of Calafate, interestingly enough, was banned the use of single-use plastic bags in grocery stores in 2009. That was long before California did that in 2014. Well, actually, there was a loophole in there in California where they actually didn't ban it until January of this year. But the thicker bags were still allowed. But Calafate in Argentina, and certain towns in Argentina, have been on that environmental bandwagon for a long time, much longer. And I think that conscientiousness that people have for sustainable tourism is important. And really the bottom line, is that people living and working and earning money in tourism in the area, they're doing something about it at a local level, and they're trying to be more sustainable. And that for me is really inspiring to see in areas like that are far away from the central cities like Buenos Aires and Santiago. I feel like they're doing something about it. And so I'd like to end on that note and ask if you have any questions at all about the presentation.
Dan, thank you so much. That was fantastic. This is one of my favorite parts of the world. As we were talking, we had to stop our conversation so that we could get started. We were just enthralled by this area. So everyone, if you have any questions, we do have a few minutes left here, and I can pass them along to Dan. So on our trips, is it possible to walk or stand on a glacier?
There's a possibility you might miss out on some other activities. We don't plan that out as part of our itinerary. But
Great, thanks for that.
if you tell me in advance, then maybe we can work something out.
Great. I did that in Alaska, and it was one of the craziest experiences of my life. That was wonderful. Next, are there any indigenous people still in these areas?
Yeah, there are. I think most of them have been kind of either incorporated into kind of the culture of the region, but it's the indigenous languages have primarily been lost in the area. There are some communities, and there's a lot of place names that refer and give honor to the Tehuelche people, but for the most part, their culture is integrated into the rest of society.
Great, thanks for that. Do you have a particular favorite species that you like to see when you go? You listed so many. Is there one that you're most attracted to?
Well, I love seeing the condors for one. You know, if they are interested in flying close by, if you're up on a ridge top and a condor flies by, it gives you the eye. It's like, you're not dead yet. It's really quite inspiring to see a bird that large take flight. And I always appreciate the sightings of puma. And I love just sitting and observing the herds of guanaco and just their interactions between each other. I think that is one of the things that I can watch them all day long.
Great. Yeah. Those really cool huts that you showed us, by chance, do our tours stay in them?
So that's where we stayed. I'm not sure what we stayed there for our photography trips last year. There are other huts. We do stay in yurts in places. We stay in geodesic domes in other places. So there's a lot of unique housing and accommodations that we utilize on these NatHab trips. I'm not sure if we'll stay at that exact place, but probably a place that's very similar.
Great. Just a couple more questions. I know we've hit the top of the hour, but these are really good trip questions. So I'll go ahead and just ask them really fast. For somebody who might be a little bit concerned about elevation, what is the elevation on the trip? How should people go about that?
Elevation really isn't an issue. It's more of they call it Patagonia flat. And you've probably heard this if you've done any trips down there, but Patagonia flat is not really that flat. Most of the trails are rugged trails. Some of them are, well-designed gravel trails, but most of them have roots and rocks and things that you would have to navigate. So it's more of a stability issue that I would recommend. It's more of a stability issue than an elevation. The highest elevation that we would get to would be 4,000 feet. which is because the mountains are up at 11,000 is the highest mountain there, Fitzroy. And so, yeah, we would only arrive to about 4,000, maybe 5,000, but that's still fairly low when you consider issues with high elevation sicknesses.
Great. Last question here. This is very true. Patagonia is known for its challenging weather. When would you recommend somebody to go if they're trying to avoid the worst, if you can avoid, if it's possible?
I'm not sure that you can really avoid it. I think that it tends to be windier in the spring, similar to here in Colorado. We get some spring weather. So the spring would be November, December, but this last December was absolutely gorgeous. I have had snow at any time of the year, falling at any month of the year down there, as well as up in Alaska. And so it's really going to vary depending on the day. I can't give you an exact, you can have bad weather at any time and you can have great weather at any time.
Oh, isn't that the truth? The beautiful, just wild ruggedness of this place.
Uh,
It's great. All right, Dan. Well, I will go ahead and wrap up the Q&A portion and turn it back to you for any last closing comments.
well, I think that this is an exceptional, if you have not been to Patagonia, you should visit Patagonia. Glaciers National Park is one of the many different parks that you can visit there, and I would recommend that you extend your time. It's a long flight, so spend some time before and after the trip exploring some other places, maybe outside of the planned itinerary. It's a big place and it's a long distance to travel for 10 days for a trip. But if you only have that time, great, we're going to show you the best and most amazing sights in those 10 days. But if you have extra time, take it and get out there and explore and hike. And don't forget your water bottle when you come down, because we will refill this over and over again. We're trying to be more sustainable in that way.
Oh, yes, I could not agree more. I daydream about this place every single day and getting on a flight to going back down. So it is a true gem of this planet. So, Dan, thanks again for taking on this virtual journey down to the very southern tip of South America. And I would like to thank everybody who tuned in. If you're interested in information on how you can travel with NatHab, give us a call at 800-543-8917 or send us an email at info@nathab.com. Our adventure specialists are more than happy to help you. Join us tomorrow for our next daily dose of nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including registration links on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation and the replay will be available on our website soon. With that, I will conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody.